Hello and welcome to Insurance in Canada. I'm your host, Rick Pineda. Thank you so much for joining me. On today's episode, we're looking at three articles. The first article looks at the Insurance Bureau of Canada's report about auto theft losses in Canada over the last 10 years. Our second article, we've talked previously about the insurance application of self-driving automobiles. This article looks at the implications of self-driving trucks on Ontario roads. In our last article, we look at the upcoming changes to our Alberta insurance reform and what that means for their new Care First model. So without further ado, here is Insurance in the News. So our first article today looks at the trend of thefts over the last 10 years from a report from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. We've had some good news for the first half of 2025 with thefts seeming to be coming down. However, we're still nowhere close to numbers of thefts we've had 10 years ago. So let's see what the article has to say. IBC auto theft losses surged 200% over the past decade. Losses from auto theft claims in Canada have surged dramatically over the past decade. While the first half of 2025 saw a decline in claims costs and losses compared to the same period in 2024, the long-term trend remains alarming. IBC said losses have risen 200% over 10 years, increasing from just over 120 million in the first half of 2015 to more than 360 million in the first half of 2025. Claims counts have also increased 50% over the same period from 8,567 to 12,887. Of course, vehicle the price of vehicles have increased dramatically over the last 10 years as well, which could account for why claims costs have increased 200%, while number of vehicles still has only increased 50% over the last 10 years, taking into account probably the types of vehicles are being stolen as well. More expensive vehicles lately as opposed back in 2015. These increases have direct impact on the Canadian auto insurance market, the Bureau said. Rising theft-related losses have increased the amount insurers pay out in claims, placing upward pressures on premium policyholders. Higher claims frequency also affects risk assessments and underwriting decisions, with insurers adjusting coverage terms or premiums to account for regions and vehicle types more prone to theft. Something we've seen here in Ontario, definitely increases in premiums, but also vehicles that are on a high theft vehicle list being assessed. High theft vehicle surcharges anywhere from $500 to $1,500, depending on the insurance company, as a punitive measure for people to dissuade them from purchasing these types of vehicles, unless most insurance companies will waive those high theft vehicle surcharges if proper anti-theft systems, tracking systems are added to these types of vehicles. So Liam McGinty, Vice President, Federal Affairs, IBC, explained that Canada's auto theft rates over the last decade have placed pressure on drivers' insurance premiums, compromised public safety, caused concern and trauma for Canadians. He added that stolen vehicles are often linked to organized crime, amplifying the societal and financial impact beyond individual claims. The IBC also highlighted recent federal actions, including strengthening border security and tougher bail and sentencing laws for repeat offenders, as steps that have helped curb theft. However, the organization stressed that additional measures are necessary to further reduce claims and maintain affordability for policyholders. Recommended steps included modernizing the Canadian Vehicle Motor Safety Standards to make vehicles harder to steal, strengthening the Canadian Border Service Agency to prevent stolen vehicles from leaving the country, and expanding data sharing through the interprovincial record exchange. I'm all for more law enforcement getting involved, both federally, provincially, and municipally, to combat auto theft. Making changes to the vehicle safety standards to make vehicles harder to steal. To me, that's putting the burden on the automotive industry, on private industry, to address an issue that government, provincial, municipal governments, federal governments really haven't been taking seriously, except for the last 3 or 4 years. So, in my opinion, do more with law enforcement to support them, get better interoperability, exchange information between the levels, different levels of law enforcement, I think is going to go a lot further than trying to ask the automotive industry to make their vehicles harder to steal. I mean, whatever they can come up with, I'm sure there'll be some thief out there who can figure out a way to get around those types of systems. Again, he noted that coordinated actions by law enforcement, insurers, governments, and drivers are showing progress, but more is needed. He emphasized that addressing auto theft is essential for stabilizing insurance costs and protecting policyholders. Another aspect is consumer education and awareness. Law enforcement, the insurance industry has really been amping up, making consumers aware about vehicle theft and what they can do to try and combat it. And we're starting to see the fruits of that labor, that effort, the educational aspect, as well as the increase in law enforcement. Like I said, the article mentioned at the beginning of the year how the first 6 months of the 2025 have seen a decrease in auto thefts, and I believe it's a combination of increase the education and increase actions by the law enforcement that's accounting for this. So hopefully we'll see further decreases for the second half of 2025 as well. The second article looks at self-driving trucks operating on Ontario roads. I've talked about in previous episodes the issues when it comes to self-driving automobiles, vehicles operating on not only Canadian roads, but American roads as well. The issue of insurance, whether an accident involving a self-driving vehicle is more of a product liability as opposed to a traditional automobile insurance risk. So with plans for self-driving trucks to make their appearance on Ontario roads, what issues are involved with those types of vehicles operating, and have they really been addressed now that a push is starting to be made to actually use these vehicles? How self-driving trucks could change Ontario's insurance equation. The major grocery chain is planning to put self-driving delivery trucks on the road in Toronto by year's end. An insurance expert tells Canadian Underwriter that may not be as much of a risk as people think. In a late September press release, Loblaws says it signed a contract with Gaddick, a US-based startup. That deal would see 50 autonomous trucks delivering groceries and household goods to around 300 stores, according to news reports. Excuse me. I wonder if this Gaddick has any contracts with any other companies in the US or Canada to show how their vehicles have been operating so far, to get an idea of the kind of issues they've run into so far. While many details on the insurance side will need to be sorted, there's no need to panic, says Crystal Kosonen, client executive for commercial insurance at Xera Insurance. She tells Canadian underwriters that driverless vehicles operating on Ontario's public roads must currently still have a driver in the cab as a safety measure, which makes me wonder what's the whole point of the operating, purchasing, leasing, renting these driverless trucks if you have to have a driver in the vehicle anyways. And Ontario has a close eye on the sensor system in these trucks, she adds, noting that they've demonstrated the ability to perform in several weather classifications, including small snow, small rain, and heavy rainstorms. They can't do heavy snowfall. I'd love to know what the definition of a heavy snowfall is, as opposed to a small snowfall. They can't do quick stopping. It's going to be a problem, especially with that heavy load behind them. Costin says in Ontario in the winter, our highway lines do deteriorate, and in construction zones, there's new lines everywhere. And you would think they'd try to address these issues before letting these vehicles on the road, but I guess Ontario roads are going to be a guinea pig for these types of vehicles. So good luck, everyone. In terms of allowing driverless trucking, she says Ontario walks a middle line between some U.S. states like Texas and California, which allow the vehicles, and European countries that apply for far tighter restrictions. The still pilot project is still very monitored by the government. If these vehicles are involved in accidents, she adds there will be inquiries, but they may not focus strictly on automobile insurance coverage. I'm sure the lawyers would disagree with that. Instead, she says they may look at issues like cybersecurity, the possibility of vehicles being taken over by outside actors, or an entire delivery fleet being taken down, which Still an insurance issue because that would be a business interruption issue if the fleet is taken down. In such cases, questions would examine what has the fleet owner done to ensure our safety of the vehicles and other people on the road, cost and tells Canadian underwriter, or for the software vendor, did they make mistakes? Is there an error in an update? Answers to such questions, she adds, will impact what requirements are set by governments via legislation to enact specific rules to ensure the safety of all road users. For now, costs and announced auto liability is a shared responsibility, and insurance coverage are based on historical data, but new autonomous driving technologies could alter the risk calculus due to the high value of sensors and radars on the trucks. How much is the repair cost on these vehicles compared to traditional trucks? She asked. It's going to be much, much more. Modern vehicles, we've seen increases in automobile insurance premiums, claims costs, not only from sources such as theft, but just the cost to repair vehicles these days is much more than it used to be. Even 10 years ago, with all the new technology that's added to vehicles, parking sensors, proximity sensors, adaptive cruise control, all this technology, when it gets damaged, is expensive to repair, as opposed to vehicles that do not have this technology. So I don't see any reason why it wouldn't transfer over to trucking. Those systems that get damaged on these autonomous trucks in an accident still need to be repaired. So that's the type of cost to repair that traditional trucks don't have. So also, they could be affected by software bugs and problems stemming from large-scale shutdowns of communication network. You're not selling me on these autonomous trucks at this point, saying stuff like that. Those changes can mean fleet insurance for trucks might at some point become a completely non-personal line, since there were no human being at the end of the food chain. At the end of the food chain, she says. I believe I get what she's trying to say here, that when it comes to fleet insurance for autonomous vehicles, we'll be rating solely on the vehicle itself and not counting rating for the operator at all, since the operator is the vehicle. So that's kind of a new concept for insurance companies in Canada anyways. In such cases, she says, new coverage models will have to respond to new categories of risks once the property and casualty industry has examined them. I don't think coverage models is the issue. It's going to be rating models will be more of an issue for insurance companies. Coverage is coverage, and insuring a autonomous vehicle is not going to be any different than insuring a traditional vehicle when it comes to providing coverage for liability, damage to the vehicle itself. But trying to rate those autonomous vehicles is going to be much more of a challenge, because there's just no data that exists right now for insurance companies to base their rates. Insurance already is not inexpensive. Insurance already is not inexpensive. That's kind of the understatement of the year. So if you're going to want to go this route, it's going to cost more, especially in the beginning, until we can get sorted. We have to get the data and know how it actually works, and cyber is likely to be the biggest exposure. Regulatory and insurance systems need to evolve alongside the technology to ensure people stay safe. Failure of the sensors can happen if it's a weather-related, cyber-related, or data issue, but cyber products will have to cover those types of things. They're not just for if somebody steals my data, costing ads. I've seen a cyber product for trucking. I haven't seen a cyber product for trucking, manufacturing, or malfunctioning of a self-driving vehicle, specifically on a commercial fleet. That will need to evolve before we can get launched. She says the property and casualty industry has historically grown to meet consumer needs, and cyber coverage, which didn't exist 15 years ago, is a prime example. As this develops, the industry is going to have to grow and adapt to ensure that we are able to cover these risks. True, but cyber coverage has been developed based on incidences that have occurred in the past. So we've been able to adapt the product and price it based on those. If we have no data whatsoever when it comes to the susceptibility of these types of vehicles to be hacked, it's going to be hard to rate and adapt the cyber product to this type of vehicle. Plus, I think most people in the general public are a little more concerned about data issues and weather-related issues when it comes to self-driving vehicles, never mind self-driving trucks. Uh, Most people aren't too concerned about, obviously it's not a zero chance of a vehicle being hacked, but at this point I'd be more concerned about a vehicle being able to interpret a particular scenario that it's being presented with and addressing it properly, that a human driver would have been able to identify and adapt to, especially when it comes to weather-related incidences and being able to adapt to those situations. That's a bigger concern for me anyways, as someone in the insurance industry and somebody who's a driver as well on Ontario roads. So we'll have to see how this works out. The article mentions that Loblaws is planning to present this by the end of, or get this off the, get them on the road by the end of the year, which is happening in a few weeks. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to do this. But I hope they really address these issues before they allow these vehicles on the road. In my opinion, probably best to take this on a more cautious approach and delay it if it's needed in order to ensure that the general public remains safe around these types of vehicles. Last article deals with the upcoming changes in Alberta auto insurance, the reforms when it comes to accident benefits and what this will mean for the industry in Alberta, the insurance industry. Under Alberta's incoming Care First auto insurance model, which goes into effect on January 1st, 2027, insurers and brokers can expect to operate under a dual system for a while as the final claims from the old model get closed, says government officials at Denton's second annual insurance summit in Toronto. Care First is the single biggest transformation of auto insurance in the history of the province of Alberta. David Mullock, Executive Director of Pensions and Insurance Policy at the Government of Alberta, says, certainly in the conversations that I've had with my own minister, they recognize that day one perfection is not the goal. It's not realistic. It's not possible. And government is comfortable with that. I'm sure government is comfortable with that, but is the general public comfortable with that, especially those people who are injured on the day one of these changes, which takes effect January 1st of 2027. There's going to be accidents that day, and I'm sure people will be injured in those accidents on January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd. So I'm sure they're not going to be as comfortable as the government is with a system that's in turmoil and not being able to address their needs, but hopefully they've got a year to get that worked out. So hopefully it all worked out by the time the changes come about. We're going to have a period of time where insurers and those within the distribution network, including brokers, are going to have a kind of a dual system, he says. There will still be claims that arise pre-January 1st, 2027, so operating in that space for a period of years is going to be very challenging as insurers and brokers gear up for the new model. The most successful ones will be those who can best disseminate the changes to clients. The biggest thing that insurer can do to help improve their operational readiness for day one is to focus on the people impact of what Care First means. We believe the most successful insurer under a Care First model are those that will recognize that it requires a blend of empathy, compassion, collaboration, and a willingness to help get people better and get back to their daily lives. Under Alberta's new auto insurance system, insurers will provide comprehensive recovery support to their consumers with the goal of returning individuals to or as close as possible to their pre-accident function. It's a hybrid no-fault model that takes inspiration from other care-based provinces with a few differences. We're calling it Care First because no-fault insurance is not really well known or understood. Other highlights under the new model include unlimited access to treatments such as chiropractic, physiotherapist, or psychologist care if needed. Income replacement up to $125,000 per year until retirement. Spousal support up to $600,000 in the event of a death. And permanent impairment benefits up to $295,000. Government says Albertans injured in an accident will be able to access those enhanced benefits more quickly with more certainty and without the need to sue in courts. Albertans will still be able to sue in certain cases. So Wow, those benefits under the new plan, I can tell you they're a lot more generous than the benefits we have here in Ontario, including taking into account the changes that are coming up for Ontario on July 1st, 2026. Unlimited access to treatment, that definitely is not in the Ontario plan, not available. 125,000 per year for income replacement, that's not available with the Ontario auto plan. 600,000 in the event of a death, not even close in Ontario. And permanent impairment benefits up to 295,000. Ontario doesn't even have a similar type of permanent impairment benefit. I'm not exactly sure what that particular coverage entails in terms of what's how it's paid out in what circumstances. So always good to see a insurance product being modified in order to better address the needs of the consumer, the injured party in an automobile accident. However, hopefully the law of unintended consequences doesn't rear its ugly head and bite the Alberta government in the butt, because when it comes to offering these generous benefits, that means more costs for the insurance companies, which means guess who in the end is going to pay for that? It is the Albertan consumer. Albertan drivers, vehicle owners will have to pay more if the insurance companies experience higher claims costs. There's only one policy premium payer, and that's the consumer. So, like I said, fingers crossed for the people of Alberta, because I know you've been experiencing sharp increases in premiums, automobile insurance premiums over the last few years. And hopefully the government has taken that into account with these new changes and what that's going to mean for what the people of Alberta will be paying for automobile insurance. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you folks in Alberta. So that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like what I do here, please subscribe. Please like this video, and make sure you follow Insurance in Canada on Twitter/X. And until next time, bye-bye.